In today's How It Works, we'll be going over hit points. Hit points are a major mechanic in World of Warships, so today we'll be going over the How It Works hit points video World of Warships did 5 years ago. This video is pretty old and outdated, so I'll be going over what information is correct and what information is wrong, and I'll give you guys the updated information on those. So let's get started by watching this video.
Every player of World of Warships has asked the following question at least once. Why do battleship shells sometimes deal either 1,000 damage or 10,000? And why do I receive so few credits after intense and hard battles? Understanding the game mechanics will help you make a greater contribution towards the victory of your team. One of the most important indicators of any player's efficiency is the amount of damage they inflict in battle. So let's begin with the damage-inflicting mechanics and the structures of ships in our game.
We'll take upgraded Japanese battleship Fuso with 57,100 HP as an example. A warship is a small floating city with a highly complex structure. So, how can one model such a complex structure in a game without turning it into an incredibly detailed and boring simulator?
First of all, instead of several dozens of compartments, we divide a ship just into the bow and rear ends, a citadel, superstructure, and casemate. We add different values to each part of the ship. Fuso's bow end has 3,700 HP, rear end 3,400 HP, casemate 8,500 HP, and superstructure 1,500 HP.
All this information that they're showing on the side here, everything here is all correct information. They haven't changed this mechanic ever since they first started the game.
Naval engineers tried to group warships' vital compartments, such as the engine room or magazine, at the center of the hull and protect them with as much armor as they possibly could. This part of a ship is called a citadel. We certainly need to reflect its importance in the game. If a ship's citadel is destroyed, she will no longer be able to fight. That's why we decided to allocate all the ship's HP there, 57,100 HP for Fuso.
Every ship does have a citadel. Now, you may not do citadel damage, but every ship does have a citadel in the game. That includes submarines, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, all of them have it.
Now it's time for the most important part. We're going to introduce a special virtual part called the hull. Fuso's hull has 42,800 HP. The sum of all Fuso's parts is 117,000 HP, but the HP indicator shows 57,100 HP only.
This means that you need to inflict 57,100 damage to the ship in order to destroy her. The part of the ship you hit and damage doesn't matter. It only affects how quickly you can destroy the ship.
The layout isn't simple and looks odd at first glance. Let's try to figure out how it works using a specific example.
Yeah, it does look a little bit complicated at first, but
Let's
once they
assume that
explain
a
it and I
shell
explain it,
dealing
it's easier.
exactly 3,000 damage is fired at our Fuso. The shell will inflict this amount of damage to the citadel only. If the shell hits...
Okay, so for battleships, cruisers, and sea aircraft carriers that you're able to do citadel damage to, you're able to do max damage to those when they hit the citadel, but to destroyers and submarines, you cannot.
any other less important parts of the ship, it will deal just 1/6 of its damage. For example, if the shell hits the bow end, the Japanese battleship will lose just 1,000 HP of her total amount.
1/6 of 3,000 is 500 HP. Why does the ship then lose 1,000 HP of her total amount? The thing is that when a shell hits the bow end, it damages this part for 500 HP and deals another 500 damage to the hull.
Yep, so as you can see, when you do a shell damage, it does 1/6, right? So 1/6 a shell, 3,000, it does 500 to the bow itself, and then 500 to the entire hull. That's why whenever you see a lot of us, we don't just aim at one spot because it'll get saturated. And when it gets saturated, it turns really black. And when it does, it means that you're only doing damage to the hull and not that actual particular part of the ship. So you just have to start aiming at somewhere else to actually do more damage. This also includes torpedo torpedoes as well. That's why sometimes when you're watching me play, I'll use wide spreads or I'll try to aim my torp somewhere else, because this saturation mechanic also applies to torpedoes as well. Any sort of damage in the game, saturation mechanic does affect it.
However, a most interesting thing will happen after 8 shells.
Unless you're able to Citadel. If you're able to actually Citadel the Citadel, like on a cruiser, battleship, or aircraft carrier, then you'll do straight, like do the max amount of damage the shell can do.
Hit Fuso's bow end, which, as we remember, has only 3,700 HP. Because of this, it will be destroyed and cease receiving damage.
After that, every shell that hits the bow end will damage the hull only. So each penetration will cause not 1,000, but just 500 damage. By the way, here's a tip for the game. A destroyed part of a ship becomes black. So you don't need to waste your shells on these parts.
Nevertheless, we can destroy the hull by firing just at the destroyed bow end. As a result, the battleship will lose 46,500 HP. If you continue to fire at the bow end after that, your shells will deal just 10% of their damage to the HP bar directly. It's clear that Fuso's rear end, Casemate, Superstructure, and Citadel.
Yep, you can clearly see how this section right here is saturated, pretty much pure black. You want to aim at the sections that aren't pure, are clearer, as you can see here, where you're able to do essentially double the damage, because you're damaging both the hull and the non-saturated module of the ship.
Are undamaged. Therefore, you can deal more damage to them, 1/6 of the shell's damage.
Now, let's assume that the shell hits the battleship Citadel. It won't deal any damage to the hull, but the Citadel will receive 3,000 damage without any reductions applied. The
That is
issue
correct.
of what part of a ship to fire at during battle depends on the specific battle conditions. But regardless of what part of Fuso you hit, you'll still need to deal exactly 57,100 damage to send the ship to the bottom.
Now, something else to point out as well, I wanted to point out, but I was waiting for the right opportunity. The French, okay, so for the French in particular, for their destroyers, they have a thing called French saturation. So their individual modules have less HP than the normal for destroyers, which means that they're able to get their parts of their ship saturated faster, which means they're able to take less damage the more damage they take. That's why if you ever hear someone talk about the French saturation, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about how these modules have less HP on the French for their destroyers, and that's for both the destroyer lines and any of the premiums, and that allows it where they're able to take less damage the more damage they take, because they're able to get saturated faster. That's what they're talking about. Also, a side note, submarines also have French saturation as well, so their aft, bow end, case, whatever parts are in a submarine, because I don't think they have a casemate. Any of those parts do have less HP than normal, so they're able to. It's a built-in saturation mechanic, so they're going to take less damage the more damage that they take, and that applies to submarines. So I just wanted to cover that to make sure, because this video is a video that I'm making for the How It Works modules video, and I needed to get this video done first so you guys understand this mechanic. So the next video I'll be going over is going to be the How It Works modules, so you guys can look forward to that one coming up soon. But yes, if you guys have any questions or concerns about the hit points in general, because they were talking about how people were asking about why they only do 1,000 damage when you shoot a certain part of the ship, and now this kind of explains it when you hit the hull. But I'm going to be getting into modules, and that's where when you hit the guns or the turrets, it's going to explain it a little bit more, so that'll be a little bit more detailed in the next video. So if you guys have any questions or anything, let me know in the comments down below, and see you guys in the next one. Deuces.